mean, it's personal, first of all. And one of the things, because I'm a private person, so all of a sudden I've made this decision that I'm going to, not that I give every detail of my life, but I mean, I'm revealing stuff to strangers.
Welcome to the Crossing It Off podcast, where each episode we share the stories of individuals that are living out their bucket/life goal lists. I am your host, Roger Williams, and through hearing our guests' adventures, my goal is that you will find encouragement and empowerment to add and cross items off of your list. At this time, I'd like to welcome my guest, Carol Yee, and she is a world traveler and food lover. Carol, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Roger. I'm really excited to be here.
Good. I'm excited for you to be here as well, very much so. What is the item you crossed off your bucket list?
In December 2020, I actually published a memoir, my memoir that I had been sort of working on for a number of years. And it finally got published, and it's available for sale in ebook, paperback, hardcover, as well as audiobook. I was really excited about that.
Yeah, I imagine. It's actually one of the items on my bucket list to do the same thing, not just write a book, but write a memoir. So lots of times when I do these interviews, I'm like, sometimes it's hard to come up with questions. This interview, this podcast, that wasn't the case because I have a lot of questions. When I interview someone that became a professional mermaid, it's like, well, I don't know how much that's going to pertain to me. It's hard for me to come up with questions, but this one hits home very much. So what motivated you to want to write the memoir?
I had always, along the way, jotted notes down. I do travel a lot for both work and pleasure, and I would always make notes of my impressions of places, foods that we ate, restaurants we went to. All of notes just kind of started stacking up. And then I was working for a company. We had international projects, but they were a very domestically focused company. And so some of my coworkers struggled with how to work effectively within an international environment. And I decided that this was a time to take out those notes and write a memoir that was part memoir, part how to be more comfortable traveling, and then also what I get out of traveling and why I think traveling and meeting new people and trying new foods is so important.
So what you've said it here that it took you a long time. I read some other place where you said you struggled with getting the book out. What were those things that you struggled with? Why did it take you so long to get the book out?
I kept rewriting the food chapter. I didn't write other chapters. That chapter was just so fun. I didn't know how to go about writing a book. I had never done it before. It seemed quite daunting. I didn't know anybody that had written a book other than, kind of a scholarly type book, but, either a fun book or a memoir or even a novel. I didn't know how to start. So I joined some writing groups, and, we all were writing our pieces, but it kind of like we were spinning our wheels because nobody in the group knew how to go about publishing a book. Then through LinkedIn, I connected with a professor at Georgetown University, and he happened to be, he sent me an email one day or a message, and he's like, do you know anybody that wants to write a book? I have this book writing program at Georgetown. I'd like you to spread the word. And I was like, well, I kind of want to write a book. And so it's called Book Creators, and he still runs it at Georgetown. And it's a program where for 5 months you are in the Book Creators part of the program, where you end up with a full manuscript by the end of the 5 months. You have a developmental editor that you work with.
Wow.
You have classes, you have resources, etc. And then Book Creators is affiliated with a hybrid press called New Degree Press. And you work with them for the next 5 months. So basically, in less than a year, you get a book published. And the second half with New Degree Press, you work with a marketing and revisions editor, and you have book cover people and
Wow.
illustrators and different things. And so I was able to finally get that book published that was, maybe 50%, 2/3 of the way, had a draft already, but it just wasn't a full book yet. And so I was able to do that through this program.
Is that program, Book Creators, is that a paid program or is that a free program, or how do you have to apply to be a part of it? How does that work?
It's a paid program.
Okay.
So they run, I think, 3 sessions a year. Book Creators is the name of the program, and Eric Kester is the professor that runs it. And on LinkedIn and other social media places, he'll just put out a call and say, hey, I'm starting a new program in January. Whoever is interested in writing a book, please apply. And the application is just talking about yourself and what you want to write about, and you have a call with him. And I've never heard of him turning down anybody.
Sure.
So, and it's a really great program that without it, I would not have a published book in hand.
That is a great resource. I will make sure I link that in the show notes for this episode. Was there a point in that process when you were part of that program? Was there a point that like it just all clicked, like it all came together, or was it a long drawn out process? Was there something that clicked in you and said, okay, now I know how to finish the book. Now I know, was there something that happened along your journey that made it easier, or was it just slogging through?
I think for some people it's slogging through, but for me, it helped me bring it all home. Mm-hmm. Because I needed to have someone external than my friends and family validate what I was writing, and that people would be interested in what I was writing. It's for one thing sitting there and saying, oh yeah, this sounds really good. It's like, but who's going to buy this, and will anybody be interested?
Right.
And the other thing that you suffer through sometimes is imposter syndrome.
Sure.
And so that even during the program, I mean, there are times when you're like, nobody's going to read this. Why is anybody going to want to spend money to read this? And so having resources available to encourage you and to keep you going and hold you accountable, I think is really useful, especially for a first book where you don't really understand and know how the process works.
I completed the Camino de Santiago. I was on it. I met somebody that was semi-famous and an author, and they were walking along too. And we started talking about things that were on our bucket list, and I told him what I was doing, and he said, and about the book that I want to write. And he said, yeah, I'd read that. And that was just like something that just totally inflamed my brain. I was like, really? You would read this? Okay, well, no. Because originally, it's like you said, you stumble into that imposter syndrome where you don't think you're good enough, or that you have a good story, or whatever it is. And for a published author, well-known published author, to sit there and say to me, yeah, I would read that. It's like, okay, well, that's enough for me. If I just, self-publish and he buys a copy, I'm good. So that's really good to hear. What was one thing that you had to overcome in the writing process, and why was it there for you? Why was that stumbling block there for you, do you think?
I think it was more just not understanding how to get a book published. That really was the stumbling block. I mean, on the writing side, like I said, there were chapters I loved and I focused on, and there were a few chapters that I thought were important to the story that I was less interested in. So those were also stumbling blocks. There was one chapter that I talked about technology and how technology has changed from when I first started traveling as a kid till now. And I realized that aerograms don't even exist anymore. And I had to explain what an aerogram was.
Okay, you're gonna have to explain what that is now, because I don't know what that is, and I'm 50, so you help me out.
Those were the really thin blue paper that you write in, and then you folded it and pasted it all together, so there was no envelope, and it was just like this flimsy little thing but when you received it, you knew it came from overseas somewhere.
Okay.
And it's like, that was so typical back then, and I don't even know when it went out of vogue, but I realized that there are no aerograms anymore. So that technology section, even though I lived it, I wasn't really necessarily paying attention to what was happening when, and so I found it very challenging to write about. But yet, if I was writing about a memoir about myself and my travels and my development as a person, I felt that the technology part, there were stories I wanted to tell there. And so that was a challenging point for me.
My previous life, I worked with teenagers, and I always would tell them, I'm like, I'm so jealous of you because you have, I mean, we used to have to, when I was in high school, we used to have to call up the travel agent just to get an airplane ticket, and there weren't resources, but you had to go to the library to find a book about the location that you wanted to go to and get information. And then you still had to rely on the travel agent to tell you which hotel that was best to stay at, and that was their suggestion based on their income, not necessarily maybe the best place for you or whatever. And now people just have all the information inside their phone to be able to say, where do I go, what do I want to do? So and what's the best place to do it at? And that just, the availability of information to travel now is, I think it's just absolutely incredible. So I look forward to reading that section in your book. Did you come up with like a daily writing schedule of like, did it become not saying it became a chore, but did you have like, I'm going to force myself? I think that was one of the things that as I was looking at, and as I'm looking at writing a book myself, is that I wanted to be able to be in a place where I wasn't disturbed and that I had a schedule of writing. I'm going to write this much, or I'm going to try to get this many words done, or was it just a free flow? Is there something that worked better for you, and what would you suggest to others?
Yeah, I mean, when you read books about writing, oftentimes they say, oh, yes, I get up at 4 every morning and write, 5,000 words before breakfast. I mean, that's not me. How I wrote, I didn't have a daily word count or a daily time that I wrote at. What I knew was I had deadlines or milestones, like, by December 10th, I had to be done with, 3 chapters. And I wrote to those deadlines. That's what worked for me. But every writer, I think, is different. So, however you works for you, as long as you're writing and you're getting to an end product, that's what's most important. But through the Book Creators Program, you found that there were, people that had all different styles, and there wasn't one right or correct style to focus on.
How do you find that style for you? Was it just trial and error? Was it just talking to other people and listening and hearing somebody else's idea? How do you figure out what your style is going to be?
I think for me, it just came naturally. I mean, I knew I didn't want to set up a schedule, because they suggested setting up a schedule, from 6 to 8, right, or whatever. I didn't want to be boxed in like that. I wanted to write when I felt like, not felt like it, but was inspired to write. And sometimes it was on Saturday morning, and sometimes it was at 8 to 10 o'clock at night. So to me, I didn't want to box myself in and feel like, okay, I have to sit at my computer at this time and then have nothing come out to me. That was more frustrating or discouraging than if I just sat whenever I was inspired to do so. So it just came naturally to me that that's how I needed to work. And, in my own work, I mean, my professional life, I mean, I always worked to deadlines. I never said, oh, I have to do, X amount of work today. I just knew that by this date I had to complete this. And however I did that, whether I stayed up till midnight or just did a little bit every day, it depended on my schedule and what I was working on. So I think that was a carryover to my writing style.
You would start writing when you were inspired. Is there something that you did to get inspired? Did you have a ritual? Did you go back through your notes that you had taken for so many years and reread them? Or what was the thing that inspired? Did you go outside and get in nature?
Even though I wasn't conscious of it, I think when you're writing a book, you're oftentimes thinking about it. In your mind, even if you're washing dishes or cooking dinner or working or whatever. And so I think I was just working through things. And so then I would be ready to write at a certain time. But I didn't realize it for a long time that that's what I was doing. And a friend of mine says, well, aren't you thinking about your book? It's like, well, no. And then I realized, well, maybe I am. So yeah, there's nothing dramatic about, what inspired me, but it was just, for me, that happened to be the right time, and I would sit down and write.
You talked about just there about a friend kind of holding you accountable. Outside of the program, the Book Creators, did you find yourself telling people, like, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to talk to people about it because then I'll have too much accountability. But at the same time, I'd like some accountability. I think for me, I need to sequester myself away and from everything. What was that? What was that like? Were there people that were pushing you that you said your family knew and stuff, but were they pushing you and holding you accountable? And was that something you needed or you wanted, or was it?
I still belonged to a writing group, even
Hmm.
though I was doing the program. And I think it wasn't like they every time we met they said, "Oh, how many words do you have
Right.
now?" or
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
But they were there and they were very supportive, and they were um, making sure that I finished.
Hmm.
Because I think so many times, I mean, maybe not so much within book creators, even though I do know that some people don't ever finish,
Hmm.
even book creators, but the majority of people do. And I know that if for whatever reason you decide to put it aside, it's really hard to come back to. And so just the program was holding me accountable, but also my writing group, they knew what I was doing, they knew I wanted to do it, and they were looking forward to reading it, and they did read parts of it along the way to help me along. So there's real people there that you're feeling obligated
Uh-huh.
to. It's not just like, oh, classmates that you'll never see again, maybe, but I mean these are friends
Sure.
and colleagues that it's like, yeah, this is really important. You want to do it, so let's do it. The support I got from them was really great.
What do you think makes writing a memoir different than, say, writing nonfiction or fiction? What's the difference in the presentation or what the author is trying to get out of writing the book for?
I mean, it's personal, first of all.
Mhm.
And one of the things, because I'm a private person, so all of a sudden I've made this decision that
Wow.
I'm going to, not that I give every detail of my life, but I mean, I'm revealing stuff
Hmm.
to strangers that do I want to do this? So there were certainly times when I thought, had to stop and think to see, is this something I want to write
Oh wow.
about my own life? But then also it's like, well, I should write about it. I mean, this is an important milestone or event in my life, or an important part of my personality that I think should be out there if I'm going to tell my story, if I'm going to write my memoir. I shouldn't shortchange people by
Mm.
uh, keeping back part of who I am. But that was a really challenging part of writing a memoir because it's not like fiction or nonfiction where fiction, you're creating people and,
Uh-huh.
it can be anything you want. And in nonfiction, you're writing about a certain topic. So, you're an expert in that or, know a lot about it. But memoir is really in a gray area between the two because you're writing about
Mm.
yourself.
And one of the things that I've heard about writing memoir or piece of advice, I think I was watching a YouTube video or something that they talked about not necessarily having an end goal for the reader, but that you want to present information and let them take what they will out of it or get to, did you find yourself believing or do you feel like writing a memoir you should have a point that you want a takeaway at the end of someone reading the book?
I had not heard that, so I have to think about what you just said. But I mean, for me in my book, um, there was a takeaway,
Mm-hmm.
but it was up to the reader about if they wanted to grasp that takeaway. I mean, they could read the book and just say, "Oh, this is, this girl's
I see what you're
story,
saying.
and
Yeah.
it's really interesting what she's saying." But
Right.
my takeaway was travel makes us better people. Travel both educates us and opens us to new experiences and new people. And oh, by the way, that Afghan halfway across the world, they want the same things we want. They want a job, they want to provide for their family. And if I
Sure.
didn't travel, I wouldn't know all these things. So that was the takeaway that, you should, I think people should get over their fears of traveling
Sure,
and
for sure.
travel, even if it's to Europe, that's fine.
Mhm.
Just get out of your comfort zone and go someplace new. And so, whether or not the reader at the end of the day actually realized that that was something that they should do too. I don't know, but I put it out there for them to act on if they wanted.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I think I've been struggling with that a little bit when I heard that as well. It's like, do I need to have a point, right, for my memoir? Well, sure you do. You have to. There's got to be a story and a story arc at some level, but I do want to tell my story, and it's actually the story of my relationships with my dad and my son, and comparing and contrasting those a little bit, and yeah, so I want people to walk away with something, but I don't want to shove it down their throat or be like, this is the point at the end, like a thesis statement or something. So thanks for that. What is one thing you would suggest to help someone else be successful at writing a memoir if they were going to try to cross it off their bucket list?
Well, first of all, just do it. I mean,
Mhm.
even if you never publish it, I think writing your
For
memoir
sure.
is really important for yourself, your family, your kids, whomever.
Right.
I know, for my own family, I'm an only child, but I have lots of cousins and they all have
Mm.
children. And some of their children, don't know any of the stories
Right.
from when I grew up, about my grandparents, etc.
Mm.
Now, I didn't necessarily include a lot about them in my book, but I included some. And I had some of my second cousins say, oh, well, I didn't know that. So I think it's really important to write it down, especially, to get those thoughts down before, either parents, grandparents pass away, or,
Sure.
as time goes, we all forget, the little details that make a book really interesting. So that's one thing. But I think, finding other like people to help and encourage you, to hold you accountable is really important. I mean, Book Creators is one program, but there are other programs out there. There's also a lot of on Facebook and LinkedIn and different places. There's different um, writing groups. A big thing is writers find critique group partners or
Okay.
partners. So there's a lots of ways, especially with the internet these days. And even though there's lots of issues that have come up because of COVID, there's some positives that have also come up in that people now are really
Right.
comfortable about reaching out through Zoom and doing things virtually. So you don't have to fly halfway across the country to meet,
Right.
someone. So I think there are a lot of resources that authors, especially first-time authors, should take advantage of and just kind of get out there, because even first-time authors, there's groups out there for people
Right.
that are first-time authors, and just having that camaraderie and going through the same pains and issues, I think is really it's really good to have other people supporting you.
So you talked a little bit about the experience that your grandparents had and other relatives. Did you write them from what you knew, or did you interview family members to find, to get more details correct? How'd that work?
Unfortunately, my grandparents are passed away, and my mother, who was like the font of all knowledge, is also gone now. So I had to kind of rely on my own memories. It was things about them that impacted me
Mm.
and or explained where I came from, or how I ended up being who I am. So I do talk a little bit about where they came from. My grandparents, three of them came from southern China. One of them was born in California, which was unheard of in 1900 for
Mhm.
a Chinese person to be born there. So, I was able to weave in some of those things to so that the reader could understand where I came from and what my background was. So I personally wasn't from China. I personally, wasn't the child of immigrants. So my story is a little different than other people's who might be writing a different story.
Yeah, but those events also impacted you in your life too, down,
Exactly.
as
I mean,
children.
they helped me become who I am,
Sure.
right?
What's the next item on your list that you would like to cross off?
So I didn't know I was going to do this, but I decided to take some of the themes of my memoir um, and create a middle grade young reader's story that
Awesome.
felt because I realized my company had a office for a while in northern Michigan, and it exposed me to I've only lived on the coast. I've lived on the West Coast, and now I live on the East Coast. So it exposed me to Middle America, and I've met other people who, like I said, the company I was working for, they were very domestically oriented. So I realized that not everybody is like me, and not everybody is open to different peoples and cultures. And
Sure.
I think it's very important to get younger people, so, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, interested in other cultures and people, so that to catch them before they become set in their ways of, you're different, you're the enemy, you're the other, I don't like you, etc. So
Yes.
that's what I'm currently working on. And it's
Awesome.
really exciting to me. I mean, and it's been challenging trying to write for fifth graders. I mean, I don't have kids. I don't know how they speak. I don't know what they do these days. But I think, it's an important story, and I'm pleased that where my manuscript is at this point in time.
That is completely awesome. I greatly, as a parent of three, I greatly appreciate that you have that out there. I was lucky enough to support my kids as they were definitely in high school to travel. My oldest went to Japan when she was 12 for 2 weeks, and Israel for 2 months when she was a junior in high school. And my middle child, she went to Ecuador for 2 weeks and traveled with a family friend, and they stayed very locally in people's homes and stuff. Had a completely different experience. She'd been in hotels, and my son traveled a lot with inside the United States, and had some annual things that he would do that encouraged his confidence as a person. So I greatly appreciate you focusing on young people. And
The manuscript I'm currently working on is just takes place in California, cross cultural between three kids. But I have visions for future books featuring these characters, and
Nice.
in the future they will travel overseas. That's the plan. So I wanted to take it a little bit at a
Yeah,
time.
that's great. Is there anything on your list that is different than writing? Like, do you have something that you want writing in? I'll throw in travel too. Is there something on there that's different than writing and traveling?
Oh, but travel.
So I know it's great, but what I just want to see if what else you're thinking about.
I'd be interested in learning how to cook some foreign foods
Okay.
better. I mean,
Better. All right.
but for me, I have cookbooks and I try, and they never turn out very well. So, going and, taking some classes, or, going to Italy for 2 weeks on a, cooking training tour or
Right.
whatever. I mean, that to me, I think would be really interesting, because I would like, you know, you can't always travel like right now. I mean, you're
Sure.
traveling, but a lot of us don't travel right now. And if I could be cooking some of the ethnic foods that I love, that would be so
Right.
much better. But I don't feel I have the knowledge or the skill to do so. So I think that that's something that I would love to do in the future, that is similar to what I'm doing, but
Right.
totally different.
Yeah, very cool. I love that idea. And I think half the time it's just the ingredients you do know
Yeah.
is the difference.
You're going to be in Italy and with their great markets for several months, and you'll be eating well.
Yes, and I do hope to learn a little how to cook for myself a little bit. Carol, if somebody wanted to learn more about your books, where would they find you, and how would they get in for more information about those things?
So my memoir is called Welcome Back to Abuja Once Again, How I Became a Citizen of the World. I do have a website, carolje.com, and then you can purchase my book at Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Kobo. You can order it from your independent bookstore, which I highly recommend if you have a favorite
For
independent
sure.
bookstore. And then on my website, I will be keeping people updated on my upcoming book, which currently the working title is Andy Wong, Cultural Whisperer. Andy is a little Chinese American girl, and she is friends with a Palestinian American boy, and then a new neighbor moves in next door, and she's from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So this is the threesome that is the story is about. So
Nice. Awesome. Hey, I really appreciate you being here today and doing this interview. I know it was beneficial to me. I hope it was beneficial to others. And I wish you all the success going forward with your books. And I will put all that information you just shared in the show notes so that people can find more information about you.
Great. Thank you very much, Roger. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and good luck with your book too.
Thanks. Well, I might ask for a little advice.
You know where to find me.
I do. As a reminder to our listeners, in this episode's show notes, you will find links to learn more about this week's guests and information on how you can cross this item off of your list. You can follow my adventures of crossing items off my bucket list on Instagram and Facebook, and as always, new episodes of this podcast are available to stream every Friday morning. We will meet you here next week, and until then, keep living out your list.